The JP Morgan Nasdaq Equity Premium Income ETF, known as ticker symbol JEPQ or JEPQ, has been one of my top performing, higher yielding, more income oriented ETFs across my entire portfolio over the past several years now. Now, as it sits right now, I currently have around 508 shares of JEPQ across my portfolio, with an average cost per share in the mid 40s. So what's crazy is that I'm not only up quite substantially on my price return of JEPQ, but this ETF also has paid me a nice solid dividend every single month, and this is since I started buying it a while back. Now in this video, we're not only going to talk about what the JP Morgan Nasdaq Equity Premium Income ETF is and exactly how this ETF works and how it generates so much income consistently for investors, but then later on in this video, we're going to go through and I'm going to share with you exactly how much JEPQ an investor would potentially need to purchase in order to retire completely off this one single income-oriented ETF. So whether you actually hold any shares of JEPQ as of right now, or maybe you've ever thought about it, make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into it. Real quick, for those that haven't already, make sure to go to the first link in my description and grab my new dividend investing ebook, where I share exactly how I went from $0 invested to now earning over $6,000 on a monthly basis and over $1 million invested in the markets. Along with the ebook, you're also going to receive my custom dividend tracker, where you can track your dividend progress on an ongoing basis and reach your dividend investing goals. So make sure to grab yourself a copy of my dividend investing ebook and the new dividend tracker today. It's the first link in my description. So jumping right into what this ETF is, how it works, of course, this ETF is provided by JP Morgan and has been trading as of right now just over 2 years. The fund's inception date was May 3rd, 2022. Now the fund's overview is pretty simple. It is seeking consistent premium income with lower volatility. JEPQ, the Nasdaq Equity Premium Income ETF, seeks to deliver monthly distributable income and Nasdaq 100 exposure with less volatility. The expertise, says the lead portfolio manager Hamilton R., has over 3 decades of experience investing in equities and equity derivatives. The portfolio says this: underlying equity portfolio employs an applied data science approach to fundamental research and portfolio construction. Disciplined option overlay implements written out of the money Nasdaq 100 index call options that seek to generate distributable monthly income. So in case you're not super familiar with options and this might sound a little bit confusing to you, for the most part, this fund buys a basket of equities and sells Nasdaq 100 index call options. Now, by selling these out of the money Nasdaq 100 index call options, this ETF not only protects downside because of the cover call overlay, but also by doing that, it generates a ton of premium, which is how this ETF pays so much in dividends to investors consistently. And speaking of dividends, just to give you an idea, for an ETF that costs just around $50 or $55 per share, depending on when you're watching this video, this ETF has been paying around 35, 36, 45, 41 cents, more or less, I would say on average around 42 cents, more or less over the last 12 or so months. Now, if you were to annualize it out, that looks like around 10.3% 30-day SEC yield, which I can't speak for everyone, but I would happily earn 10% in dividends per year. If that means on top of it, I'm gonna hold on to an ETF that seems to just keep growing and growing and growing. Now with this ETF, you are going to pay an expense ratio of just 0.35% to hold on to it. And across the board, as far as these income focused, more cover call style ETFs, although 0.35 cents is much more than you're gonna pay for most index funds, this is not bad whatsoever comparing it to most of the other similar styled ETFs across the market. Now, I've been very vocal about the fact that JEPQ not only pays a consistent monthly dividend, and that I've actually received a ton of cash flow over the past several years that I've held on to JEPQ because I personally bought into this ETF right when it came out. But on top of that, because of my average cost being in the mid 40s, this ETF is actually up substantially once again for this style of ETF, being up around $10 or so from where I first bought into it. That's pretty impressive, especially with that cover call overlay, which systematically speaking doesn't really have the potential for all that much upside. But to be more specific, on the 1 year time frame, JEPQ is up around 15%, and on the max time frame, this ETF is up in the green around 10.5%, which if we look at a lot of the other cover call style ETFs, things like TSLY, things like QYLD, even things like JEPQ is outperforming pretty much everything in its class. Now, by buying into JEPQ, of course, you're getting exposure to a ton of technology because of the basket of holdings this ETF buys into. So that means that JEPQ potentially might have a little bit more of a high beta than other cover call style ETFs across the market. But again, with that cover call overlay, you are getting that protection. And for the most part, take it from someone that's held onto this ETF for a while, it doesn't trade all that crazy, at least most of the time. Now, we talked a little bit about dividends, and this is going to be very important, especially when we try to seek to figure out exactly how much JEPQ an investor would potentially need to invest into in order to retire completely free and clear off the dividends. Now, although JEPQ does pay a pretty decent dividend yield, it's not the highest dividend across the entire market. There definitely are other covered call style ETFs like SPYI, income focused ETFs across the market. But again, with some of those other ones, you aren't necessarily exposed to the same quality and management that JEPQ offers, in my opinion. But like we sort of talked about, more or less JEPQ offers investors like myself, and probably like a lot of you guys, more or less 45 cents on average per month, which is what investors have seen for the most part over the last, say, 12 or so months. Now, because a lot of investors, including myself in that bucket, are buying into some of these higher yielding cover call style, more income focused ETFs in hopes to use some of the dividend income in the future for things like bills or even potentially to retire early, I definitely thought it'd be fun to make a video talking about JEPQ and exactly how much of it an investor would of course need if they wanted to of course retire completely off this income focused ETF. So of course we don't know exactly how much every single person needs per month to live off of. But just to build out one situation, it says right here the cost of living in Florida at least per month equates to around $42.25 per person. So for this specific video's sake, we are going to be trying to figure out how much JEPQ an investor would need to invest into in order to cover around $40 to $100 per month in dividends. Now, because JEPQ more or less pays 45 cents per month on average, and of course the amount that JEPQ pays and a lot of these other covered call style ETFs are going to pay on a monthly basis is going to be due to things like volatility, option premiums, etc. But because JEPQ pays around 45 cents more or less, that means an investor, in theory, in order to receive around $40 to $100 or so per month, they would need to invest and buy 9,382 shares of JEPQ in order to have the dividend completely cover their bills, at least for the example that we're talking about. Now, because JEPQ right now is more or less $54 per share, again, more or less, that means an investor in theory would only need to invest $506,000 or so to have the dividend completely cover their expenses, if of course that's what their expenses were for this video's example. Now, before you say $500,000 plus is an insane amount of money, just realize that if you wanted to potentially invest into something like SPY and retire completely free and clear off the dividend that this ETF offers. Now, side note, I'm by no means comparing SPY to JEPQ, but I'm just saying if of course you wanted to live off of dividends, it would probably take you around 5 to 6 times as much money to be able to get to that same point. And although a lot of these higher yielding ETFs, especially covered call style ETFs, might pay consistent dividends every single month, but some of the ETFs out there that do that also have decaying share price over time, which makes the total return not really worth investing into in the first place. Now, JEPQ over the last, say, 2.08 years, which again is not all that much data to go off of, but take it with a grain of salt, JEPQ with dividends reinvested into more shares of JEPQ has returned on average annually 13.6% or a total return of 30.32%. Now, some investors have even ragged on different cover call style ETFs because they sort of look at it as a way that dividend investors are sort of trying to cut corners and earn dividends a little bit quicker, and by doing so, they're foregoing the potential for larger total return. But with JEPQ, you can see perfectly clear here that even though investors were getting paid along the way, they still have received a nice total return if they invested into this ETF at the start. But all in all, for me personally, I'm going to continue to buy more and more shares of the JP Morgan NASDAQ Equity Premium Income ETF over time and continue to stack more shares into my portfolio because of what this ETF has offered and because of the strategy that it employs. But now lastly, maybe most importantly, I want to hear from you guys down below when it comes to JEPQ. Are you currently holding any shares of this ETF in your portfolio as it says as of right now? And if so, how many shares do you have as of right now? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like and subscribe for more picture content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.